Yeah, sure. I do. I think they're very dishonest. Mail-in ballots, very dishonest.
And isn't it true that you yourself have voted by mail?
I do. I don't even know who the woman. Let's see. I don't know who. It's Marla.
You say Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla. Yeah, that's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to? No.
Here.
Carol.
Oh,
the person you just pointed to was E. Jean Carroll. It's true with stars that they can grab women by the.
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
And now you said before, a couple of minutes ago, that this was just locker room talk.
It's locker room talk.
And so does that mean that you didn't really mean it?
No, it's locker room talk. I don't know. It's just the way people talk.
We're back with Vaughn, Neil, Sue, and Rev. So that's what he's like on the stand under oath. Vaughn Hilliard, mail-in ballots. Quote, I think they're very dishonest. Mail-in ballots are very dishonest. Isn't it true that you vote by mail? Yep, I do. I don't know that woman. I don't know her. Oh, wait, it's Marla. You're saying that's my wife? That's my wife. It's E. Jean Carroll. And then this is just epically offensive, which I guess goes to my question for Neil. Will he or won't he take the stand? Is it true that stars can grab women by the P word? Trump. Well, if you look over the last, this is my favorite, million years, it's been largely true. For a million years, stars have been able to grab women in the P word. And you consider yourself to be a star? Quote, I think you can say that, yeah. I mean, is there really a chance that that man will take the stand in front of a jury?
I'd contend yes, Nicole, and that is because after covering Donald Trump for all these years, this is a man who has a hard time resisting the microphone or resisting the keyboard, and he likes to go on the attack. And when we're talking about weeks of potential key witnesses, from Stormy Daniels to David Pecker taking the stand, you know, this is a moment where Donald Trump is going to have to listen to hours of testimony, days of testimony, potentially 4 days of Michael Cohen testimony. And despite whatever his legal counsel advises him, you know, go back to the E. Jean Carroll trial, when in the second trial, right, he ended up testifying for just 3 minutes, and there was great frustration because he felt like he had missed the opportunity in the first trial to justly defend himself against the charges from E. Jean Carroll, that he had a missed opportunity. Instead, what did you see? Him go back out on the attack on campaign stages, further defaming her, going on social media, further defaming her. And so for Donald Trump, the last thing he would want is resisting that. And, you know, and so much a part of this is that opportunity for him in front of this jury to go even potentially muddy the waters or call into question the veracity of these stories. For Donald Trump, you know, if I may here, if you look at the eras of his life, he has left so many of us to be the tortured poets, to try to make sense as journalists of who and his relationships and what is real and what is not. And I have little reason to believe that he would not want to take that opportunity to make that just as difficult on these 12 jurors who he has now met eye to eye with, each and every one of them, and individuals who have said they don't have a strong opinion of him, and a man who has believed that he can woo the American public to vote for him. I would think that every reason he has to believe that he could woo 12 individuals sitting 15 feet away from him to vote in his favor inside of a courtroom, too.
I mean, Vaughn, I think you are right, and I think of all of us, you understand, and I'm sorry for you for this, but you understand what's between his ears better than anybody. I think that the difference, and I just remember my own reporting from the Mueller time, that Rudy and all of his lawyers' position was that they'd lay their bodies down between the White House and wherever Robert Mueller sat before they'd let Trump testify on his own behalf if there was a criminal risk. And in this case, there is a criminal risk.
Absolutely. But if it means potentially being able to win the White House and suspend, if you were to be found guilty, and suspend any sort of a prison time, I guess the question is, what are the stakes? Even if it means potentially throwing himself in the middle of this, and despite whatever his legal counsel tries to do and convince him on his own behalf, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Of course, his legal team, I think, as you guys are much more, and Neil is much more legally equipped to be making this argument. But from a political lens, which I think Donald Trump so often views even than the legal, I think that it is still very much within the realm of possibility he could decide to go that route.
One other piece of reporting that I remember wishing I didn't possess at the time was his rage at the book drafted by Stormy Daniels, particularly her descriptions of their intimate moments. He doesn't care about being called an incompetent commander-in-chief. He doesn't care about the stories about him disparaging the men and women of the military, calling them suckers and losers. He doesn't seem to care about the facts of January 6th coming out. He was reported by two people I was talking to at the time to care very much about the material covered by Stormy Daniels. These are things that get right up into his stuff.
Absolutely, and get him to respond. Look, we've got opening statements that I believe just during literally that commercial break, Judge Merchan announcing, Nicole, saying, quote, we're going to have opening statements on Monday morning. This trial is starting. And Donald Trump, he has tried to avoid this moment. His legal team has fought on his behalf, as most defense lawyers will try to do, to avoid these moments, to avoid these circumstances here. And yet, even just here in the last 30 minutes, his team trying to put forward several motions in front of the judge, to which Judge Merchan snapped back saying, quote, I have handed down decisions. There is nothing else to be argued. We will have opening arguments on Monday. There is a point when you accept my rulings. That was his message to the defense team that is trying to protect their client, Donald Trump, knowing that these very emotional, difficult circumstances, some that go around allegations of him having extramarital affairs with his current wife, Melania, are going to come to the forefront of the American public's mind and the news cycle over the course of the next month and a half.
Vaughn, have any family members been with Donald Trump?
Not at this point of time that I'm aware of. We have not seen any of his sons or Melania here. We have seen several aides. Jason Miller was here yesterday. Stephen Chung, his current spokesman, was in the courthouse here today. So he's been flanked by campaign staff as well as his legal team, but not his family. Nicole.
Neil, an extraordinary moment. We are, as Vaughn just reported, now heading toward opening statements. That will be the next time we see this shot behind Vaughn. It'll be the next time Suzanne Craig is down in that overflow room. It'll be the next time we understand what, if any, anxieties, reservations, concerns these 12 jurors and 6 alternates have. And that'll be the first day of perhaps the rest of the Donald Trump story.
That's right. I mean, it's a historic moment that's going to occur on Monday, the first trial of a former president. And while I always resist quarreling with Vaughn because he's so good, and especially here, Nicole, where he's dropping all these Taylor Swift references, but I do have to just say, I do think there's, on this question of whether Donald Trump is going to testify, there's a world of difference between Donald Trump and a microphone out there in the public and Donald Trump and being in court, because in court you have regular rules of evidence. You can't just, go and meander and with all the detours he takes. But most importantly, you're subject to cross-examination and, of course, under the penalty of perjury. So I suspect, Vaughn's impulse, which is Trump can't stop restraining himself, is right. He'll tweet, he'll go give speeches in front of the courthouse steps and so on. But when it comes to whether he's going to take the stand inside the courtroom, well, to put it in Vaughn terms, if Trump does so, he will face an LOML, the loss of his life. And I think that's what the lawyers are going to say.
I saw you nodding.
No way that I would believe Donald Trump is going on that stand. He absolutely is narcissistic. He definitely can't resist a microphone. But he also knows the difference between a mic and a courtroom hearing of a microphone. He knows if he gets on that stand, he opens himself up. No matter how they rule on the hearing they do today, they may bar some things. There's just so much to work with on Donald Trump. And he knows that. He knows what they don't know that he did. And he is absolutely going to bluff and play games. Yeah, he knows what they don't know. And he will not take that stand. I do not believe he will do that. And for someone said that, you know, because he can handle it and take care of the state thing if he wins politically, he can't take care of the state.
Yeah.
He can only take care of federal. This is a state trial. He can't pardon himself if he wins the election, if he's convicted. He can't do anything about the state. And good luck to him calling Governor Hochul asking for a pardon.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.